Hey everyone! So somehow it's the end of March already. I don't know if you can see the little butt. It's definitely springtime here, which is great. The cats really appreciate it because I can open up the windows. They're busybodies, so hi! I don't know how everyone else's March went, but mood rating had me in kind of a chokehold. So there was no way for me to not read something that I was in the mood for. It really started after A Fate Inked in Blood, which I think was the second book I read this month. But that was kind of sparked by a book called Birthright, which I started in February and then finished right at the beginning of March. Because of that, I did not make very much headway into some of the projects that I've been working on because I've been a little too busy reading KU books. So that's something I'm hoping to change in April. I finally got out of that mode maybe a week ago and have slowly been making some headway on a couple other projects and finishing up some books that were left over from January and February. Actually, I think December too. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. Birthright and Midnight Ruin are books 3 and 4 of the Dragon Bride series. I talked about Birthright at the end of my February video. Midnight Ruin is the 4th book, and that one follows Elsie and Owen. She's been pining for him for years, and he hasn't claimed her as his mate, despite knowing that she's kind of waited for him. He finally comes home after years of being away at war. He still doesn't make a move, and she's decided that she is fed up with waiting for him, so she decides that it's time for her to leave. She can't continue to live like this and torture herself like this. So she decides that she's going to go back to her former home to find her mom and her sister because she left them behind when she left 10 years prior. So she goes back and finds that weird religious fanatics have kind of set up shop in her former hometown. She clashes with them and has a couple confrontations with them and finds out that Owen has followed her and he helps her out of a few situations, and she confronts him and is like, I've been waiting for you, what the hell is going on? He kind of just apologizes and is like, I can't, you're not her, so I can't do this. What he doesn't say is that he's basically suffering from PTSD from being at war, and so he thinks his dragon won't talk to him or whatever. So he's having issues with that, and then lies and tells her that she's not the one, and all of this other stuff is going on at the same time, and so they kind of have to team up, and she wants to rescue her sister and things like that. So I mean, obviously they do and figure things out. I do think there's more to come in this series, and I would continue. I would read again from this author. I don't know if this was totally my favorite because it took him a little bit to get his head out of his ass, but not the worst thing I've ever read by any means. They're not crazy I'm a man, do what I say kind of thing, and I wouldn't have kept reading past the first book if this was the case. Alright, so the next one I actually have a physical copy of. So I read A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen. It's a Viking-inspired romance. This was the February Fairy Loot adult pick. So some people have things called, I don't know if they're called God's gifts. Basically receive a gift from the gods that helps them do things like fish or fight in battle or all these other things. Freya has an ability, but it's supposed to be a secret, but somehow her useless asshole of a husband finds out and tells the Jarl about her gift, who then forces her to reveal her gift by making her fight in single combat against his son Bjorn, who is blessed by Tyr, who is one of the gods of war. After she reveals her gift, which is from the goddess Hlyn, she is also a goddess of war, but she also protects, so it basically gives her this giant shield. So after she reveals her gift, the Jarl says that she will become his second wife because her husband has like sold her out, and so she's like, if I win, I want a divorce. You find out that there's a prophecy that as the Shield Maiden, whoever controls her destiny will become the king. She has to go through a bunch of trials, and the Jarl assigns Bjorn to protect her during those, and then also to prevent her from being stolen by his rivals. And like their attraction grows more and more throughout the book. I can't decide if I really enjoyed this, or like if this was like really a good book, or if it was just exactly what I was in the mood for at the time. Freya was kind of impulsive in the sense that she like jumps to conclusions and like makes decisions based on those conclusions when she very much doesn't have all the information that she needs to like have come to that conclusion. She kind of gives me like Too Stupid to Live vibes because of that. Like all she's ever wanted was to become a shield maiden and like fight in a shield wall and all this other stuff. And like once she starts fighting, she's like, oh, I don't think this is what I want. And that's totally fine. She's not good at it. Again, that's also totally fine because she's never trained for that. She's never fought in battle. She's never like had to learn these skills. I think her father taught her and her brother. She doesn't like really fight, so she hasn't like honed that skill. I feel like most of the men need to like get taken out back and like shot or beaten at the very least. Did I have issues? Yeah. Will I read the second book? Yeah. I haven't read Bridge Kingdom by this same author, and I've been meaning to check it out for a really long time. I think if it has similar issues as this one, she might not be an author that I would pick up again in the future. I did really like the atmosphere and like the magic and the gods and that sort of thing. And then there's some reveals about like her family. Yeah, her father died, I think like a year or so ago. It's just her brother and her mother that she has left as family, but she also has a friend who is like in love with her brother. There's some reveals about them and like how they treat her and all that sort of thing. So some of the relationship building I liked, but then some of it I was like, I don't know. I am interested in checking out the second one, so we will, I guess, wait until it comes out to have like a final verdict. The next books that I read are books 1 and 2 in the Stay a Spell series, which are Wolf Gone Wild and Don't Hex and Drive. Wolf Gone Wild is the first book, and it's a group of like, I can't remember if it's 5 or 6 sisters. They're the Savoy sisters. They all live in New Orleans. They are all witches with different powers. The first book follows Evie, who is a hexbreaker, and she is approached by a werewolf who hasn't been able to shift in months, and his wolf has been slowly taking over and like driving him insane. And so he approaches her to help break the curse that he's under, because he's like, I've tried everything, like it has to be this, because like I can't figure out what's going on. And like her sister has this rule that they don't deal with werewolves. She's like, they're too unpredictable, and so she has to like go to her sister and be like, look, I know I'm not even supposed to like talk to him, but there is actually something wrong with him. So in order to prevent disaster, I think we need to work with him. And her sister agrees, and Mateo, who is the werewolf, discovers that his wolf is like calmer and quieter when she's around. So he hires her to like come sit in his studio while he works, because he's a sculptor. Like it also gives her a little more time to like try and figure out who might have placed a curse on him. It's slow burn, forced proximity type romance. There's a really good buildup in the sexual tension. I don't think there's nodding, but I can't remember. There might have been. It was super fun. I had a really fun time, and it was like exactly what I wanted, but also like very well done. I generally like the sibling relationships in this book, or in these two books, because they're not overbearing or in your face, and like they have boundaries that are respected, and everything. This was a Janessa recommendation. If you have never heard of her, her handle on TikTok and Instagram is Mimo Reads. I think it's like Mimo_reads. I'll put it in the description. Her name is Janessa, and she reads like romance everything. So if you need a recommendation for any kind of romance, go look at her page, because she has literally everything that you could ever want. Fantasy romance, dark romance, contemporary romance, historical, sci-fi romance, like whatever you want. She reads like very widely in the romance genre, so the ones that like sound good, I'll check out. But the ones that I'm like can be hit or miss. And then like the ones that I'm like, okay, this sounds like a mafia romance, or like this sounds like something that I'm not interested in. Like I don't always pick up, but she very rarely steers me wrong. And like she has this thing that she calls the trifecta, which I think is high fantasy, plot, and some spice. That's like her ideal book. So that's what she is on the search for like most of the time. So that fits with pretty much all I want in a lot of my romance. So yeah, it's a great time. Book 2 follows Isadora, who doesn't drive and very rarely rides in cars. She gets hit when she's on her bike by Devraj, who is a vampire, and he's part of an elite warrior force of vampires. He has been invited to town by the leader of the vampires in New Orleans to look into a ring of like rogue vampires that are trafficking young women for blood, and she offers to help since she is a healer. So they look into things together. It's a little less slow burn than the first one. She's quiet and he's a nomad, so she doesn't really want to start anything with him, whether it's a relationship or just sex, mostly because she knows that she'll get too attached. So she doesn't want to start anything with him since he's leaving town when he's done with the investigation. And so like things go on from there. I was really enjoying the series, but sometimes series like this can start feeling formulaic by the end, and I didn't want that to be my experience. So I decided to wait before continuing on with the rest of the book. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do think there are 6 books. I think I have 4 more books in the series. And then I decided that I wasn't done with romance. So I went on to books 1 and 2 of Holidays with Heart, which follow the Heart sisters. First one is My Phony Valentine. They're also hockey romance, which I enjoy. It's probably my favorite sports romance genre because I know nothing about hockey, so I can't be like, oh, that's wrong, that's incorrect, that's inaccurate, So like, I don't sit there and have that distracting me. The first one is like a fake dating situation. Starts off with this like typical mean girl who was a bully in high school, making a dig at Poppy, who is someone she's bullied for a long time, by saying like, oh, like too bad you don't have a boyfriend or something. And Poppy is like, actually I do. And she like grabs the person in front of her in line in the coffee shop and is like, yeah, I'm dating him. And it turns out that his name's Dallas, and he's a famous hockey player for the Chicago team. They're in like a small suburb outside of Chicago. He just bought a house in town for him and his grandmother to live in while she recovers from a hip replacement, or it's some sort of surgery. And Poppy owns a restaurant in town, and he hires her to cook for his grandmother while he is away for games. His manager and grandmother also then turn around to convince both of them that it would help his image to date a cute chef from a small town, and it would also like bring her more publicity for her restaurant that is like on the verge of failing, and she owes a bunch of people money and is behind on bills, and like her parents helped her pay for the restaurant, so she wants to pay them back, and like all this kind of stuff. They like come up with this contract and like of course start to develop feelings for one another. It is fade to black, which I don't love. Like that was not like where I was hoping it was going. I'll read a Fade to Black, like kind of once in a blue moon, like once or like a couple a year. The relationship building was well done enough for me to want to like read the second book. The second book follows Eloise, who is the youngest sister. Poppy was the middle sister. The first book is called My Phony Valentine. The second book is called My Lucky Charm. So like St. Patty's Day. Eloise has just landed a job at Dallas's hockey team. She's hired as like a handler / assistant for the new guy on the team named Grayson, and he's kind of a jerk, hasn't really gelled with the team. He was traded from Philadelphia, and she discovers that he left she's like an 11 or 12-year-old daughter behind in Philadelphia, and so he was mad that he was traded in the first place, but he's also like, I just had to leave like my entire world behind because I had to leave her. It also turns out that he is the same guy that she approached on New Year's Eve to kiss her at midnight to make a cheating ex jealous. She recognizes him right away, but then he pretends not to recognize her at first. It does come out her ex was also an employer, so she doesn't want to develop feelings for him because it might put her new job in jeopardy. And of course they start to develop feelings, kind of goes from there. I did forget to mention that their dad is deaf, so they all know sign language, so that was really cool representation in the book. This one is also Fade to Black. The daughter is super cute. Her relationship with Eloise is great. Her relationship with Grayson is cute. And then I really liked that Grayson and his baby mama were like on really good terms. It was like fairly refreshing to see, and not just like, oh, one of them is terrible. I didn't love the sibling dynamics in these two. Like Poppy and Eloise are great. Like they were fun together. But the oldest sister is like really overbearing, and like they all kind of force each other to share stuff. And I was like, man, boundaries, like, come on. Like, so that stuff really bothers me. And I don't know if that says a lot about the relationship that I have with my siblings, but I mean, it probably does. I might read her story when it comes out. I think it's supposed to come out later this year. I might read it just so I can say that I've like finished the series, but I don't know. She's kind of, I didn't love it. The next book that I read is Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. I loved this. I picked this up when I wandered into Barnes & Noble to kill time between like a work meeting and a work dinner. I was immediately hooked. This follows Ada, who is an interior designer who just got hired to work, like to turn a house on a working ranch into like a guest house. She's still dealing with like the after effects of a divorce. I think it was like a year ago that she got divorced, and she wants a fresh start, like for her and her business. And so I think she found out through like a friend of a friend. So she arrives in town like late one night, the day before she's supposed to meet her new employer, and she ends up in a dive bar trying to find dinner and meets a guy there, and she's like finishing up work, and he like initially approached her and she was like, no, I'm working, and he was like, okay, come find me when you're done. And so she like makes eyes at him and like leads them to the back, like where the bathrooms are, and they end up like kissing and getting handsy, but they're interrupted, and when that happens she leaves, like doesn't get his name or anything like that. When she arrives at the ranch the next morning, she realizes that he's her new boss. So she says there can't be anything between them because there was a really big power imbalance in her marriage, so she doesn't want that in any potential relationship that she has in the future. And like luckily he respects that. Their relationship develops from there. He like gives her tools to like make her more independent, and she's like, wow. And I had so much fun. Like, this was such a good book. He was super respectful, and then she realized she could be in a relationship again and also like develop new friendships, and like they grew a lot together. I definitely want to read more from this author and in this series. I don't know if I want to read the first book since it's like brother's best friend, and that's not my favorite trope. In order to be a completionist, I would, or like if I was like really wanting to complete this series, then I would probably go back and read it. But I assume there will be at least 2 more, so I will probably pick those up. This was one of my favorites of the month. I read Killers of a Certain Age, which I borrowed from my mom. I've already returned it. This follows 4 women who were trained as like the first all-women assassins group of an extra-governmental organization called the Museum that killed people that they felt needed to be killed. So like former Nazis, drug lords, crime lords, things like that. At the start of the novel, they have just retired after 40 years of service, and they are on a celebratory trip when they realize that they are now targets themselves. In order to survive, they have to figure out why the museum has put bounties out on them. There are a few dual timeline chapters, but it's not like super intense with the dual timeline. It's like scenes from when they were recruited and like past hits that they were involved in. It mainly follows the present day. So if you don't like dual timeline, this is like very minimal, so you might be able to look past it. And it's like actually relevant to everything that's going on. Some of their trip takes place on St. Kitts and Nevis, which is where Damien and I went on our honeymoon, so I really enjoyed those parts. I was like, oh, I've been there. I've had that drink. Best drink in the Caribbean. Probably, having only been there. I would definitely recommend if you like Deanna Rayburn books, or if you like the idea of women assassins, or like older characters, or if you like the movie Red. The next book I read is A Rogue of One's Own. This is, what is this series called? A League of Extraordinary Women. And this series follows 4 women, like 4 friends who are all suffragists. And it takes place in like the 1880s in Oxford. A little bit in London, but more in Oxford. So this is the second book in the series. Lucy is the leader of the suffragist movement or organization in Oxford. Their group has just purchased a 50%, or just obtained a 50% share of a leasing company in order to print and distribute suffragist materials. The other half is owned by Lord Ballantyne. His name's Tristan. He's like a known rake, and rumor has it that he doesn't discriminate based on gender, which was like a big no-no at the time. He was the second son, and he went off to war for several years, basically until his older brother died, I think in a riding accident. And he returns, and his father gives him several months to get his act together, so he'll be an acceptable match for the bride that his father has picked out for him. He and Lucy knew each other when they were children, so they have a history, and when she confronts him, he makes her the offer that if she sleeps with him for one night, like stays with him for one night, then he'll give her a 1% share, so she'll have majority ownership and can make all the business decisions. So like obviously, maybe not obviously if you don't read romance or historical romance or anything, but at first she says no, and then like she's like, oh, I have this like in my back pocket, and he's like, you have 3 months to take me up on this offer, so think about it. And yeah, they're really, really well-researched books, and they take place during a really important time in history, especially for women. And then the author's notes and like afterwards, I can't remember what she calls them, have a lot of like further information on laws and things from the time, like not just laws, but also like different publications and things like that. It's really interesting. Even those are really interesting to read. I'm not sure that he's my favorite. He might be my second favorite after the first book, but I think she is one of my favorite leads from the stories. I don't have the 4th book, but I will pick that up hopefully one of the next times I get to the store. And then there's also a cat in that one, which made it even better. The next book that I read is Bride by Allie Hazelwood. This is probably my favorite read of the month. This follows Misery, who is a vampire, and she agrees to be the bride to Lo, who is a werewolf. And in this world, which I think is just like kind of an alternate to ours, I think it's set in like the Southwest somewhere. There's werewolves, vampires, and humans. Werewolves are the strongest. Humans are the majority population. And vampires, I think, are really heavily involved in business. Vampires and werewolves don't like each other. They've been at war in the past, but they are currently not fighting. But they have like they're really strict about who comes in and out of their territories. Vampires and humans have a treaty, but it involves sending a hostage or like a tribute to the human sector for 10 years in order for it to be effective, and not just some like random child that gets sent. It has to be the child of someone high ranking. So Misery's father is like the leader of all the vampires, at least in that area. So she gets sent as a child and lives there for 10 years. So she meets her friend Serena. Serena is an orphan and has been like given to Misery as like a companion because she's like expendable, I guess, according to society. She like grows up with Serena, and Serena's a journalist and Misery is a computer IT type person. So she basically like went home and then was like, hey, can I just go work in the human world because I'm going to be with my friend because I hate it here. So Serena went missing like just before Misery was summoned home to become this bride. And she agrees when she hears Lowe's name because she thinks that he was listed in Serena's notes and might be connected to her disappearance, or can at least tell her what she was working on and that sort of thing. So she agrees to go try and help find her friend. Lowe is the new-ish alpha of his pack and is still dealing with like retaliation from some of the loyalists from the last alpha. He's dealing with some issues as well. Some of the vampire and werewolf lore is like retold in an interesting way. I feel like Allie Hazelwood is like found her genre. If you like any of her other stuff, you will probably like this one, unless you don't really like paranormal romance or urban fantasy. And there were a couple moments where I could see people being like, this was info dumpy. But to me, it was just world building and like part of the story. I had such a fun time. I am going to assume that there will be a second one based on some of the events at the end of the book. I assume it'll follow, like the next book would follow a different couple. Lowe is kind of like a giant cinnamon roll, so like if you're a fan of that, then check it out. Following that one, I was like, great, let's continue. So I went with The Fake Mate, which I got this edition from Fairy Loot. I got Bride from Illumicrate, or well, Afterlight technically. In the Fake Mate world, werewolves are like known to exist, and they have designations like Alpha, Omega. Unmated alphas are supposedly really dangerous and unstable. Noah, who is an alpha, has been working at this hospital with no issues for several years, and he doesn't have a mate. He takes like a pretty high dose of like hormone or pheromone, whatever, suppressants to like keep things under control, mostly to keep pheromones or whatever like wafting out of him to like attract other people, more than to like keep himself under control, if that makes sense. The idea of like designations having an impact on people that way is like also considered kind of out of date, but the hospital board has somehow found out that he's an alpha, and he's like about to head to a hearing where he will probably either get fired or have some sort of disciplinary action taken against him for not disclosing his status. Luckily, Mackenzie, or Mac, approaches him in the break room where they work. She's an ER doctor, and she's like, hey, I just accidentally told my grandma I was dating someone, and you walked in the room and your name popped out of my mouth, so can you just take a selfie with me real quick? And he's like, actually, do you want to be my fake mate because of this situation? He like explains the situation to her, and she agrees. She is actually an Omega, which is supposed to be like the natural opposite / match to an alpha. So they obviously catch feelings. He's just a giant cinnamon roll. Like, at the beginning of the book, he comes off as, like, really standoffish, and people are like, oh, you made someone cry one time. And he was like, she tore her contact. Like, that wasn't because of me. And she's like, oh, I guess the rumors are pretty inaccurate. So he's just a giant cinnamon roll. I love that there are 2 traditionally published books out there this year so far that have nodding in them. This one and Bride. I also love that I had to explain that to Damien. He doesn't love it, but I did. And Noah is, like I said, he's a giant cinnamon roll, and he also has a really healthy relationship with his mom. I had a lot of fun with this one too. It's less like urban fantasy feeling than Bride, partly because they're doctors and they live in like Denver or Boulder or something, like somewhere in Colorado. I had a really good time with this one as well. And then I went back to League of Extraordinary Women with Portrait of a Scotsman. This follows Hattie and Lucian. She is the daughter of a prominent banking family, and he is the lord of London's underground, and he needs help going legitimate. He tends to go after lords that have made bad business decisions, and not just ones where they're like, oh, I went out of business, but like ones that kill people. So she gets caught in a compromising situation with him that he kind of engineers. So she's forced to marry him in order to like save her reputation and her family and all this stuff. And like once she finds out that he engineered this situation to get her to marry him, she tries to leave the country, but he catches her. So he ends up taking her to Scotland with him, where he has recently purchased a coal mine. She like starts to understand more of what his life has been like and more of his background, and he realizes that she's the best thing that's ever happened to him. I have to say, I'm really glad that I stuck through this, because there are moments where he like kind of has his head in his ass. He grovels enough at the end that I was satisfied. And I do think that like some of the stuff that's discussed is like really important. There's dyslexia representation in here with Hattie, and like she's also kind of been dismissed because she gets letters wrong. I think she gets numbers wrong as well. So her family's like, oh, you have no future in banking, like blah blah blah. And so they kind of like leave her out of the conversation. She's also an artist, so like she just wants to paint anyway. She's super smart. She's super intelligent. Like she listens to what her family is saying and like makes connections to other important things going on. And Lucian sees that about her. And so I feel like it's really validating for her to have him see that side of her and be like, what are you talking about? Like, you're really intelligent. Like, just because you have this issue doesn't mean that your mind is any less valuable. So I thought that was really, really good representation. And then he definitely also has PTSD from some events in his past. And like it comes out that some of that is tied to mining. And then you also have a little bit in here about unsafe working conditions for miners. And there's a little bit of like socialism in here. He's like, yeah, my goal is one day for the miners to own this mine themselves. He bought that like with that intention, and you're just like kind of like, okay, that's pretty progressive for the 1880s. Had a really good time with this one as well. After that, I was feeling the read and see-ish. So I went with A Lady's Guide to Scandal, which is the second Sophie Irwin book. This is like persuasion with a twist. The back says, being good is for wallflowers. Eliza's ready to break the rules. So this follows a woman named Eliza who has recently been widowed, and her nephew's husband is the heir to his estate, and he is also the man she wanted to marry in the first place like 10 years ago. Her family ended up forcing her into marrying the uncle instead. They see each other for the first time in 10 years, I think, at the reading of the will, which is like 9 months after her husband has died. She knew that she would receive an annuity of £500 per year, but she also learns at the reading that her husband left her lands that would provide a £10,000 a year income, making her very wealthy. However, it also came with a morality clause. She would get to keep the lands as long as she didn't do anything to disgrace the family name, and that decision was at the discretion of the nephew, the new Earl of Somerset. Her parents try to bully her into returning home with them and then also to let them manage her assets. But she and her cousin Margaret decide to go to Bath by pretending that Eliza is ill to wait out the remaining months of mourning that she has to observe as a widow. They make some new friends and she starts painting again, heals a little bit emotionally now that she's not under anyone's thumb. A couple of the friends that they make are a brother and sister that have left London after a bit of a scandal. I think his name is Max. Lord Melville is his name. Her name is Caroline. Melville knows that Somerset gets annoyed when he flirts with Eliza or talks to her or associates with her at all. So he kind of does it to get under Somerset's skin, but also does it because he finds it fun. And they slowly get to know each other and become friends and develop this friendship. And he also hires her to paint a portrait of him so he can put it in his books because he's an author. She is still in love with Somerset, but is also really enjoying the friendship that she's developed with Melville. Their banter is top notch. He's a little more open-minded than Somerset is. This is a love triangle done right. I've really enjoyed both of Sophie Irwin's books. I haven't heard if she's working on a third one, but will gladly buy it when it comes out because they're just a lot of fun. This is the Illumicrate edition and it's really pretty. The other one is up there. I don't think you can see it, but the next series that I read, I think it's called the Haven Ever After series. So the first one is Getting It On with Gargoyles. It's a set of triplets that lost their parents 6 months ago in an accident, and they are on a girls' trip with a map that one of them found in a thrift store that leads them to a town called Ever. They stop at a gas station just outside of town, and that's where Thea meets Shepherd. They get directions to the inn from him, and once they get to town, I think they spend the night there, and then the next day it's revealed that it's a monster town. So creatures like centaurs and gargoyles and werewolves and pixies and vampires and witches and everything you've ever heard of lives in this town. And they have been summoned by the keeper of this town, who's basically the mayor, because one of them, Morgan, is one of the other sisters, because she is his mate. And so they've been summoned to town. This is their orientation. The sisters use the Sanderson sisters' names as nicknames for each other. The town has sentient houses, and it feels like the adult version of Halloween Town. It's a super fun setting and atmosphere. Shepherd is a gargoyle and is one of the guardians of the Haven. I guess there's a network of havens that are all connected, and time moves differently inside the haven versus outside the haven, and it's basically a place for all these supernatural creatures to live together without humans and have a safe place to raise their families and all this sort of stuff. The sisters are tested for magic. It comes back that they have witch blood, but each one of them has different types of magic. So Shepherd and Thea are the couple in this book. There's lots of smut, but also a lot of baked goods because, I guess gargoyles feed their mates a lot. And he's oh, that includes your family too. So he'll make enough boxes of cookies for each sister and he'll deliver them every day. And I'm how are you? So yeah. So it was fun. Oh, and Shepherd is like one of the protectors. Yeah, it said one of the guardians, but they're called protectors. The second book is called Tangling with Trolls. So the second book follows Ren and Oaken, who is a troll. He's also one of the protectors of the Haven. She's tall and plus-sized and is struggling to get a handle on her magic without causing problems. Like every time she uses it, like sets things on fire or makes things too big or too small, or it like doesn't work the way that she wants. So he offers to help because he has a similar type of magic as a troll. Again, lots of smut. This one involves them each taking potions so their anatomy fits together better. Also some like fantasy rugby. I took a break in the series to read Persuasion, which is like a natural progression from Ladies' Guide to Scandal. This was a reread for me. I'm not sure I loved it as much as I have in past reads, but it's still one of my Austen faves. This edition is the Harper Muse edition, and it's like this really pretty edition. Like, yeah, the title is like way up here, but then there's also like a quote on the back. It says, "When pain is over, the remembrance of it often becomes a pleasure." But like the ship is embossed, and like there's a lot of other, like this is embossed, and like a lot of the front is embossed. So it's just such a pretty edition. So the next book that I read was the third book in the Haven Ever After series called Parting with Pixies, and this follows Aloe, who is Shepherd's older brother, and Miriam, who is a pixie. Aloe is a single dad, and his son Iggy is, I think he's 5, and he is adorable. He wants to date Miriam. She's like, "No, I think I'm a little old to be your girlfriend, but we can be best friends instead." And like she makes him a bracelet that says best friends and things like that. But she has been pining for Aloe for, I want to say 5 years, but she's decided that she can't pine over him anymore, keep like stringing herself along emotionally. And he kind of realizes that if he's going to make something happen, he needs to make it happen. Finally gets into action. So yeah, that one was really cute. The fourth book is Waltzing with Witches. Morgan is the third sister, and she gets kicked out of the inn in the middle of the night, like by the inn, because it's a sentient inn. So she goes to town hall and stays there until the keeper comes to get her, and he offers to like host her in his house since she doesn't have anywhere to stay. She like learns more about his background, but then also confronts him about why he's basically ignored her or been an outright dick to her the whole time that they've been in town. Throughout the series, everyone that she's talked to has always said like, oh, like the process to become a keeper takes a lot of like humanity out of you, and it's a really emotionally destructive process. Please be understanding. And she's finally like, I can't be understanding of this when I'm being treated like crap. So she confronts him about it, and he reveals that they met at a concert like 3 years prior, and he like knew that she was his mate. He was forced into testing to see if he could become a keeper, and then he was like forced into having the process done to him. So like definite trigger warnings for like medical non-consent. I don't think it was quite like medical in that sense, but like it's some sort of like it felt medical. I don't know. And so he was like, how can I come find you knowing what's just been done to me, knowing that I'm like not even half of what I used to be, like personality wise. And like she there's like a video of the process, so she watches it and she's like, what the hell have they done? And then their aunt Lou also comes to town. I think she arrived at the end of book 2 or 3. this is the first one where she has like page time. Keeper also helps Morgan get a little bit of a handle on her magic. The house gets involved in the smutty scenes. And then there's also a period scene because he's a vampire. Like Edward Cullen would never. I like the sibling dynamic in this series pretty well. There's like a couple weird moments where I'm like, why? But I'm like, I mean, yeah, that's something like a sibling or like a really close friend would do. So like, sure, whatever. So it wasn't like terrible. Yeah, so like definitely some weird moments, but not ones where I was like, ugh, why are you like this? That might be the last KU book that I read. There is an overarching plot where someone has been like attacking the Haven, and they've like slowly been like uncovering more about it, like who's behind it and like why. In each book they learn a little bit more. So there is that, and I do think Lou will get her own book. I think there's more coming. I think it'll come out later this year. So the next book that I read was Defy the Night. This was a reread. This follows Tessa and Korik. These are the POV characters. Tessa is an apothecary's apprentice by day and a thief and like sort of smuggler by night with a guy named Wes. And they work together to distribute medicine for a deadly fever to the poorer people who like can't afford to buy doses for their families. Korik is the younger brother to the king and serves as the king's justice, and he has a reputation for killing any rebels or smugglers that he finds. So it's like there are definite consequences to their actions if they get caught. Their parents were assassinated a couple years prior, just as the fever was starting to spread, and then Wes is caught one night and killed. So Tessa decides to sneak into the castle to assassinate the king or Korik, and or she doesn't really have a plan, and she kind of just like hides in a closet for the afternoon and then sneaks out later. And she's like just decided that she can't act on it when she gets caught. She's taken to Korik and is forced to team up with him to deal with like the corrupt council and help him with his sick brother and like figure out who has been hitting all of the like the shipments of the flowers that are used in the cure, because they only grow in certain districts. I had a great time with this again. I just got the final book in the trilogy, so I'm excited to finish the series soon. I think I have 3 more left. All right, so I I picked up Defy the Night and I like finished it at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning one day because I was like, okay, like I'll read until I fall asleep. There's like 150 pages left. I won't finish it. And what did I do? I stayed up until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning finishing this book when I should have just put it down and gone to sleep. After that, I was like, okay, I can't pick up this second book. The timing was never good for me to like pick up the second book because then I would do the same thing and stay up super late again. And I was like, no. Got to get back on like a little bit of a schedule. So I was like, okay, let me finish some of the books that I have carried over. So I decided to finish Haroun and the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie. This is the first book that I've read by Salman Rushdie. It was cute. It's a story about like the value of stories and storytelling. It follows Haroun, whose father is a storyteller, and his mother sings all the time, but his mother leaves his father for a neighbor, and his father loses his ability to tell stories. Like, just kind of like dries up because of this. So they're on a trip to help a politician get elected through one of these stories, and Haroun catches a genie disconnecting Rashid, his father's storytelling tap. And there's like a fantastical journey that ensues to help restore Rashid's storytelling gift. It's a really short book. I think it was like 210 pages, something like that. there's like a lot of like plays on words, and like there's a little glossary in the back that's like, oh, there's the name of like this thing that means like to gossip or chit chat. And I was like, oh, that's like super fitting. So it's like very clearly intentional and in ways like that. So I had a good time. I don't know that it was like my overall favorite, but it was cute. If you're into like slightly more like literary fantasy, or like, I feel like if you like books about stories, you would like it. It would be fun to pick up. Another book that I also finished finally was Queen of Shadows. This is, I think, the fifth book. Yeah, fifth book. I will have more on the vlog that I'm doing about this. Manon is like solidly my favorite character of this entire series. This is also a reread. It's been a while since I read it the first time. I think I liked it about the same. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series now that I've gotten to books that I haven't read yet. I dropped this at the end of January and finally 2 months later picked it up again and finished it in like 2 days, or like 2 sittings pretty much. That was good to get that finished. I'm still working on this one, which is volume 5, Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. This is the novel, not the comic, and it's the final book in this series. So this follows Lanjan or Lan Wangji, and Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian has been brought back to life by someone who gave up their soul in order for Wei Wuxian to get vengeance on their behalf. That happens pretty quickly in book 1, but Wei Wuxian is forced to team up with Lanjan to figure out the rest of the mystery, and they find out more information about why Wei Wuxian was killed the first time. A lot of it has to do with Wei Wuxian being the founder of demonic cultivation, and he also thinks that Lanjan hated him in his like previous life. So Wei Wuxian doesn't want Lanjan to find out who he really is. So yeah, so this is the final volume with like extra chapters. Like all of this is extra. Like these are all extra scenes and chapters. So I had finished the main story last year, like at the end of December, but I hadn't finished the extra stories. I think I still have like 150 pages, but it's like 9 o'clock, so I'll probably be able to finish this today. But even if I don't finish it today, it's going on this video because, yeah, for those of you who don't know, this is Boys Love, like Danmei. Go in, forewarned, I guess. Stuff on page is more explicit than what's in Heaven Official's Blessing, so also be forewarned if you haven't read anything, if that's the only thing you've read by this author, or haven't read anything. But, I mean, like, again, that's not a problem for me. I guess a couple stats. I read 23 books, which totaled up to 7,957 pages. I don't know if I have, like, too many more stats. So I guess like almost 50-50 KU and books that I own. One of these was from a book box from 2024, and then 2 of them were also incoming books for 2024. No, yes, from book boxes. One was one I bought out and about in 24 for our 2024 arrivals. So doing pretty okay on that part. I think Bride and Swift and Saddled are my 2 favorites. A Lady's Guide to Scandal is up there, as is Fake Mate. Queen of Shadows, like, slowly got me back into my Throne of Glass reread/completion. I think that's it for me for this month. Let me know how your Mood Read March went, because that's how mine went. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye! And yeah? Do you need help? Did you get it stuck under the table? Do you need me to rescue your mouse? Not this very second? I might have to go rescue it in a minute, but not right this second.